Hello, I'm Commander Brad Boyd, Director of Submarine Force Museum and Officer in Charge of Historic Ship Nautilus. We're starting a new video series this week, Behind the Scenes of Nautilus. We'll be going on board and outside the glass passageway. If you were a guest here before, I guarantee you're going to see something you weren't able to see then. Each week we'll be going to a new space, starting with a general overview from topside, and then we're going down below into the torpedo room. We'll go to every space in the forward compartment until we've gone through the entire forward end of the boat. If you have questions during this, please let us know. We'll do our best to answer them. Now, on the Nautilus. USS Nautilus was authorized by Congress for construction in July of 1951. General Dynamics Electric Boat Division laid the keel for her on June 14, 1952, and her keel was stamped HST by President Harry S. Truman. She was christened by Mamie Eisenhower and launched a year and a half later on January 21, 1954. 9 months later, she was commissioned on September 30, 1954. She is 319 feet long, 27 feet wide, displaces 4,092 tons while surfaced, and has a maximum speed of over 20 knots and can dive 700 feet. She has 6 torpedo tubes, all forward, or bow tubes, 2 diesel engines, a battery, and 1 nuclear reactor to generate steam and drive the electrical propulsion turbines. On January 17, 1955, Nautilus went from authorized on paper to the first vessel in the world to operate under nuclear power in less than 4 years. The first thing you may notice about Nautilus is that she looks like a Type 21 German U-boat. Well, that's because she is. At the end of World War II, the Germans had the best submarines in the world from the standpoint of hull design. Their submarines could go deeper than our boats, and so we took their hull designs and used our own systems throughout, including the first naval nuclear propulsion system. You may be asking yourself why the Navy pursued nuclear power for submarines in the first place. As with most things in the world, that answer is multifaceted. The first reason is sustainment. The limiting factor of any warship for sustainment at sea is fuel. Nuclear power would divorce the need for any ship to replenish their fuel while deployed. For a submarine, there is an additional factor: how to power the ship. Battery technology, even today, is limited in how much energy can be stored compared to the size of the battery. A means to power the battery while at sea is essential to a submarine's operations. Until Nautilus, this was only done through the internal combustion engine, originally a gasoline engine and then a diesel engine. The problem is an internal combustion engine requires oxygen. There's not enough on board a submarine to operate the engine while submerged without a way to bring in air. This would eventually be done with the USS Clamagore and the Navy's first snorkel, a system that uses a mast to allow the introduction of air from the atmosphere while running the engines with the submarine below the surface. The limitation is the submarine is still tied to being within a few feet of the surface. It is loud, and you have to have limited speed while the mast is raised. The second reason was stealth and endurance. At the end of World War II, anti-submarine detection and warfare had improved so much that submarines dependent upon outside air for their propulsion systems were unable to execute the reconnaissance missions of the day. The Cold War was heating up, and submarines were on the front lines to gather information on the Soviet Union's activities. On a couple of occasions, our submarines were detected by the Soviet Union and forced to surface as the boat had been held submerged to the point the batteries depleted and the oxygen was growing thin. This prompted the Navy to seek in earnest alternative ways to power their submarines: an air-independent propulsion method, or AIP. AIP had been researched by multiple countries in the past. The most successful was the German Navy during World War II. The Germans had come up with a way to fuel their diesel engines with hydrogen peroxide, thus providing the oxygen needed for their internal combustion engines within the fuel itself. They had been able to operate for a few hours utilizing this method on boats they had outfitted as test platforms. Thankfully, Germany never got this process working in large scale, or the Battle of the Atlantic may have turned out differently. The U.S. Navy had also taken this research at the end of World War II and had come up with some of their own preliminary designs. The third reason is timing and who you know. The who you know is Captain Hyman G. Rickover. He had been involved with the Navy's initial foray into putting nuclear power onto destroyers. He realized nuclear power could revolutionize submarines and argued strongly for that avenue. His work was the driving force that got Congress to authorize Nautilus construction. The Navy pursued both the hydrogen peroxide propulsion system and the nuclear propulsion system at the same time. But once Nautilus proved successful, the Navy shelved AIP research and put all resources into nuclear power. Nuclear power offered the ability to make the first true submarine. No longer was the submarine tied to the surface for running its engines and charging its batteries. Prior to this, a submarine could stay submerged only for a few hours. up to a day and a half to 2 days if they didn't use their engines and had a fresh charge on the battery and intake of air for the crew to breathe when they went deep. Nautilus could run her engines indefinitely and had liquid oxygen tanks to bleed oxygen into the boat's atmosphere so her crew could go 3 weeks before having to surface. The next thing you may notice is that the submarine of today looks very different from the one you see in front of you. This is due in large part to the success of Nautilus and the need to shift the operating environment of the submarine. Prior to Nautilus, a submarine spent the majority of her time on the surface, only diving to avoid detection by air or surface ships. To execute a reconnaissance mission or approach an attack of a target that required them to maintain stealth, and the environment did not support a surface attack. Now that Nautilus has successfully divorced propulsion from the atmosphere, the hull shape of a submarine needed to be re-examined. Diesel boats are essentially a surface ship with the ability to submerge more than once. The hull design was optimized for surface operations. The USS Albacore was the first diesel boat with the more familiar teardrop hull shape, which we in the U.S. Submarine Force call the Albacore hull shape in honor of USS Albacore. This new shape maximized efficiency beneath the waves and allowed for improved speed and reduced noise from water going over the hull, called flow noise, and therefore improved sonar operations. Now, for the last point before we go below, Nautilus was decommissioned on March 3rd, 1980, and converted to a museum. With this conversion, the stairs we are about to go down were installed. This is definitely not original ship's equipment. When Nautilus was active, the only way into or out of the ship was through hatches, like the one you see here. Now, let us continue to Nautilus, and I'll see you next week as we start our tour below decks in the torpedo room.